So, hi Elizabeth. Thanks for
Hello,
joining us today.
my pleasure.
Fabulous. So, let's jump straight in with this and let's start with probably the biggest question we get asked by parents, which is how do I find the right tutor for my child? Because there are so many different options. Where do I start?
Yeah, yeah. And yes, it's tutoring has become an abundance of riches in the sense of if you sort of Google tutor or find me a tutor, you've got so many options that it can be quite paralyzing the choice. It's like, do you want a group class? Do you want sort of a QMon style in person group class? Do you want something sort of very bespoke and one-to-one? And then when you do identify, okay, in person versus online, and group versus individual, then within that, then you've got a huge remit of tutors, teachers. Yeah, in terms of it, how long is a piece of string? It's very overwhelming, I think, from a parent's perspective to start that hunt. Um, it's great when you can acknowledge, okay, we do need some support. My child needs a tutor, but then the actual process can become quite daunting. So the way that I work, my private tutor online, is over the years from my experience of working internationally. Obviously, it goes without saying, no child is the same, no student is the same, and what you need or what your child needs at different points in their learning journey will vary. Um, in the sense of maybe there's a subject that the student is super confident with, but their exam technique is slightly off, and it's exam season, and they've only got like 3 weeks until the final exam, and they really need to sort of do some last minute, very effective, quick fixes. So in that world, you might want to do a handful of sessions with an examiner, as in a qualified teacher who also is an official examiner. And in the summer and the winter, they are the ones marking the real exam papers. And in another world, you might have a student potentially a little bit younger who is perfectly capable, perfectly able. The reports from the teachers are always that there's lots of potential aptitude for learning, but maybe the confidence isn't there quite so much. There's a subject, there's a topic, there's a unit that's just sort of not sinking in, or there's a trepidation around that. And in those instances, what's often effective is just having that one-to-one designated time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with, for example, an examiner level teacher, because that's not the tool that's needed for that particular sort of box. So then you might work with a tier 3 tutor who's got a degree in the relevant subject from a top university or something like that. And again, it's the one-to-one direct attention. Of course, they have the necessary knowledge in order to make effective tutoring for the student, but it's what they need for that particular sort of issue. And then in between, you've got tier 2, who are all qualified teachers with often decades of experience, head of department and things like that often. And that's kind of your middle lane. So it's sort of like 3 different lanes of tutoring. And we find that works very well because, as I say, your needs will fluctuate over the course of, let's say, 10 years of education from reception through to GCSE or potentially beyond sixth form. So that would be our approach. We also are in favor of one-to-one tuition because we see it works better. The results from a one-to-one personalized tutoring session are almost inevitably better than you would find in a group setting. Just the nature of you're not going to get as much attention for your student, for your child, as you would if you're going to have a designated bespoke lesson.
Yeah,
So yeah.
and that's what I was going to say, that ability to, and it's the reason why at Parent Guide we tend to recommend, depending on the circumstances again, but we tend to recommend you aim for someone who has at least been a teacher for a few years, just because they tend to be better at picking up the misconceptions because you just get better at recognizing them
Yeah.
and then knowing how to address them. So, in terms of being able to create something bespoke based on what they can see your child needs,
Yeah.
that level of experience makes a difference. But as you say, depending on then exam technique, examiners make perfect sense. It's I really like your approach where you can kind of
Mm.
go, what level do I actually need?
Yeah.
It's like when you're picking a software plan. Do I need the starter thing? Do I need the
Yeah.
middle road? Do I need a pro? And it makes sense. And I feel
Yeah.
like even though that's been choices, that because it's structured choices makes it much easier to find what's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I guess next question then is, and again, probably the next question we get from parents is, when should we be starting in terms of getting support? What's the nudge that says perhaps just that little bit of extra one-to-one would be
Yeah.
worth doing?
I think there are probably three main different sort of alerts that types of alerts that you might become aware of. I think the first and the one that we see most is there's a sense of slipping. There's a sense of yeah, a slide that's happening. You might pick up on that through a school report, through the termly school report or half term, through a parents' evening consultation. Through maybe your child has been moved down a set, or there's been a discussion about if the grades don't sort of pick up, then we might have to think about moving them into a different stream. So that's the one that we typically come across. And my advice with that would be, by the time it comes to your attention as a parent, it's probably already this the gradient is already probably can be quite steep. So I would act sooner rather than later, particularly if you are getting feedback from school saying, okay, I think that they need some support, something's not quite going in here. The second type would be any form of absence from school. So if maybe it's health related, it's personal circumstances, whatever it might be, if your child has been out of kind of the mainstream school environment, not by choice, of course, homeschooling is a different thing, then you probably would want to get some structures in place to help them sort of fill gaps in knowledge, and also potentially be ready to kind of reassimilate at some point. So that would be the second one. The third one would almost be kind of the opposite of those two. Are you receiving feedback that actually your son or daughter, your child, is showing real talent in a subject and actually is kind of exceeding expectations by quite a long way? You want to kind of put some nurturing in of that, because that potentially could, of course, turn into something that's really going to define their academic profile, and also, of course, life moving forwards and work options and things like that. And then the fourth one, I suppose, is exams. What is it? There are only two things, definition in life, well, three things: death, taxes, and I would say exams is the one that they've forgotten that quote. So if we are talking exams, GCSEs and A levels being the typical ones in the UK, of course, you've got IB as well. We recommend 18 months rewind from the first exam or exam season period. That's where you'd want to kind of put your marker in the sand. The reason I would suggest 18 months is that you don't know how much, you don't really it's sort of like doing a survey on a house. You don't really know what's underneath and what's in the walls and things until you actually kind of get the proper scan. And there's potentially, if at GCSE, there's potentially sort of 10 years worth of schooling that needs to be assessed. And obviously you hope that the primary foundations are strong, but you'd be surprised the number of students who get to year 9, year 10, and actually there are things from year 6 and year 7, and you're like, this is not
And
imprinted.
particularly now with these
COVID.
cohorts, because they had that interruption
Yeah.
to their early years of secondary.
Yeah.
Planning,
So
right?
I think it's dangerous to assume that all is well. Of course, you hope that, yes, 90% of what should be in place in terms of the curriculum up until that point is there. But I know from experience that's often not the case. And even if you are at a private school, an independent school, it's also not always the case. So the 18-month recommendation is because you don't know how much you're going to have to kind of find, fix, and fill in, let's say, 9 months-ish, maybe up to a year, depending on how much disruption and how much of the curriculum is or is not in place. And then that final 6 months lead up before your exam, so typically January to kind of June or December to May. At that point, you really want to be getting into the nitty-gritty of exam technique. So, and again, depending on your school, depending on your student, depending on many other variables, exam technique is a thing that needs to be taught. Some schools are great at doing it, others not as successful. It is a discipline, it is a skill that needs to be learned and then practiced. And the practice is so important. So I would say maybe 2 months to actually get a good grasp of exam technique across your different subjects. And then really you want 3 months of practice. And that means timed exercises outside of tutorials as homework. That means doing like targeting and troubleshooting those responses in tutorial time with your teacher, so they can go, great, so you got 2 out of 3 and the mark that you lost was because of this. And actually you start getting into the mindset of an examiner as a student 2-3 months before your exam, and it's just makes things, the runway is like, wasn't that a beautiful takeoff rather than yeah, so 18 months.
Fabulous. And that kind of, I think that opens up another question, which
Mm.
we get less often, but we do get, is parents saying, I think my child would really benefit from a tutor right now, but
Mm.
they are pushing back against it because they're saying, I've already got so much work, there's so much coming from school, I don't want to be spending additional time with someone. And obviously, kind of, we appreciate the reasons why a tutor will kind of benefit
Mhm.
past the additional time cost that it feels like you have initially.
Yeah.
But just for any students listening, or for parents who want to be able to relay this to their teenager,
Yeah.
what's why is this worth doing? Why is this worth the additional effort for a teen who already feels like they have lots on their plate?
Yeah, and I understand, because thinking back, um, my area is English and humanities and arts, and maths was my nemesis, and I had to have a maths tutor for my GCSEs, and I just gritted my teeth through the whole thing. And in hindsight, I realized, thank goodness I had that, because actually, if I didn't, there would have been roadblocks further down the line, potentially in terms of A-level options in university and things like that. So, of course, as an adult, as a parent, retrospectively looking back, we know that, and we're like, it is important you get X grade in this thing, because otherwise it could become an Achilles heel further down the line. Now, of course, as a teenager, you might understand, but you most likely won't care particularly. I think the way I would approach it as a student, as a teenager who's going, I've got so much to do. How is this going to, how am I going to fit it in? Why should I bother? Is it's about using that time selfishly, really, in a way. If you're saying you've got a lot to do, and obviously the subject you're receiving tutoring in, I'm assuming, is probably not one of your stronger ones, potentially, make that list on a Sunday evening of, okay, so last week in let's say maths, there were these questions I didn't get, or I just kept getting it wrong. And send that to your tutor in advance, because then that hour that you have, it will not feel like wasted time. It will not feel like it's a detracting from other areas of your study, because you will be really squeezing it, rinsing it dry, and you will feel the benefits of it. I think when students aren't engaged well, and when they are feeling like, oh, I've got this tutoring today, it's because you're not really sort of being smart about using that time. You've got to be very intentional in how you're using the tutor's knowledge and experience, from a student perspective. So that's kind of the way I tend to approach it with more reluctant students. I think from a parent perspective, it's really important at the beginning of the conversation around, okay, maybe would it help if we get you a tutor, that it doesn't feel like a punishment, because I think there can be a sense of failure or shame and all of these kind of negative associated feelings that come with, we're going to get you a tutor. And I think it's important to make it really clear as a parent, this is meant to be a boon to you, not a burden. It's not a punishment. Um, and it's not meant to feel heavy and like an added load to your week. It's meant to actually, in a way, lighten that anxiety or that trepidation you have around that subject. So I think positive framing around tutoring is really important, and that you plant that at the beginning, and that you maintain that all the way through. Um, that would be my kind of in as a parent, but also, as I say, from a student perspective, like,
Yeah.
be smart about it.
Yeah, we love the phrase working smarter, not harder. It is
Yeah.
about targeting those little bits. And any parents that are watching who, for example, run their own businesses. So as an
Mm,
ex-teacher, I went
mm,
into this and I was okay. I was kind of muddling through. But I tell you what, when I found a business coach, when I found someone with the expertise to look at what I was doing and go, that bit's brilliant, keep doing that. This bit not working so well, try
mm,
this.
mm,
I flew.
mm.
It's having that expert backup to support you in it, having almost more of a mentor situation
Yeah,
than a like we're going to make you do extra lessons with an extra teacher, which
yeah,
you can understand from a teenage perspective. It's like, no, thank you very much.
yeah.
So yeah,
And
absolutely.
I
And
think,
just in the confidence difference as well. When you go
um,
in and you're like, no, I've had this support, I know what I'm doing now. Going into those exams feeling confident can make a world of difference.
yeah.
So
And
yeah,
I think, like you say, work smarter, not harder. Yes, you could not have the tutor and you could spend 3.5 hours muddling through something yourself, which you could probably do in 20 minutes with the tutor, because it's like, okay, you want time gains, get your questions prepped for the session, like go in intentional about, I don't understand this thing, please can you help me? And you will buy back that time that you would have otherwise been going, oh my God, okay, throw that, scrap that, because yeah, the tutor is there to help you. It's not
yeah,
meant to be a hindrance, and it's certainly not meant to be perceived as such. So
yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Fabulous. And I also, I mean, I wanted to ask, but I feel like we've already answered how parents can help their teen make the most of their time with their tutor. But I think if they are perhaps nudging their child in the direction of, you know,
Mm,
find and list the topics that you're stuck on at the moment and
yeah.
send them over in advance. I know when I was doing some tutoring way back when for maths, if they turned up and we just went through a past paper, some of it was really useful time, some of it
Mm,
was a bit like,
mm,
you clearly know this,
mm.
let's move on. If you have a really clear structure of these are the bits I need to cover, it makes life much easier from the tutor's perspective as well, and it means that all of that time is really well spent. So I think unless there's anything you want to add in terms of how
No,
parents can.
just yeah, I think what I suggest is that you together with your child, you actually establish 2 to 3 targets per half term per subject. So before you, like during the half term break, of course I appreciate getting your teenager to talk is not always the easiest thing in the world, but asking them, what 2 or 3 things would you really like to achieve in this next half term period? And that could be specific topics that they're not sure about. That could be mastering a new sort of essay structure. That could be effective revision strategies if there's sort of something that's not quite working for them in their sort of personal revision, whatever it might be. Together establishing what those tutor things are, and of course looping in your tutor and going, okay, great, so for the next half term these are the things that I know Jacob would really like to achieve. And then you're a little team, and so those 2 or 3 targets can then be broken down into, as I say, on a Sunday, that you as the student or you as the parent say, okay, what are your questions, what are the topics that you want to look at this week with your tutor? Because like you say, the students that come through and they just sort of wait to be given a task, yes, of course, if they apply themselves and all the other things, then they will flourish. But my goodness, the difference when the student goes, I'd really love to look at this with you this week, because then I'm like, yes, I'm on your, brilliant, that's excellent, I'm going to put 10 minutes aside, I'm going to prep some questions for you, we're going to hit this. And it's just sort of like you see this blossoming, and the rate of improvement between the students that are engaged and invested in their learning as an individual with the parents help as an individual versus kind of, okay, there you go, and you have your hour, off you go. It's huge.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
appreciate it's difficult motivating your teenager. I do, of course, understand that, but I think it goes back to the initial conversation of and positive framing of, this is something that we're really excited about for you, because this is going to unlock the next level of the game for you, whether it's GCSEs or A levels. So
Yeah, and in the context of UCAS, if they've started down the process of figuring out what courses they're interested in and doing the research, they're going to know what grades they need to be aiming for. And at that point, it's a very simple conversation. I want to help you make sure that you can get here so that you can go there.
yeah, yeah.
So what do we need to do to get you up to this grade? And that's something that we haven't really I don't think people really register
Mm,
necessarily with
mm,
tutors, is that it doesn't just have to be a specific subject. You talked about revision techniques and things as well, because for some students, particularly maybe those with some kind of special educational need where
mm.
organisation is a challenge, and I speak from personal experience as a person with ADHD and a child with ADHD, organising myself can be interesting, and so strategies and support with that I think
Mm.
would probably have benefited me quite a lot at that age, and that's something that you don't necessarily think of when you think of tutoring, do you?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
perfectly doable.
yeah. And it's also the sort of thing where I think that organization revision strategies, actually sort of managing workload and things, it's they're like, yes, there's PSHC in school and things like that, but they're not teaching you those skills in
No,
that.
they don't.
And it's the sort of thing where you might not want to be asking your parents, because then you worry that actually that just means they're going to be on my case even more than they were before, because now they think that I'm asking for them to manage my schedule and manage my academic life, and that's not what I think teenagers are asking for. They're saying, what are the tools? How can I do this for myself? So I think a tutor, as kind of that middle party between not your school teacher, not your parent, is actually a really useful person when they can say, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed. Like, I've got 2 exams next week and a driving test or something, and I can't, I'm struggling. So that's where you can get somebody to give you the tips and the tricks who you're probably more likely to listen to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's very much where the parent guide came about, because even if your
Because you have
teenager
that, don't
does
you? You've
actually,
got, yeah.
if they proactively ask you, most parents kind of find themselves going, well, it's been a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah. Then you,
I
how do
don't
I do
really
that life
remember.
thing?
And, where do you even start? Because so much has changed.
Mm,
So, as parents and teachers, we
mm,
had a bit of a head start, but it's still not simple when it's your own child, because they don't want to listen to you, because that's how
no.
teenagers work. So,
Yeah.
that middle person, that can be really beneficial. So,
Yeah.
before we finish, then
Mm.
let's just wrap up with a sensible question. How can people find and book tutors with you
Yes,
so that they
absolutely.
can?
So the website is myprivatetutoronline.com. And we're on socials and things like that as well. The email is info@myprivatetutoronline.com. And you're also welcome to drop me a WhatsApp or a text. So I'm on 07749339110. And yeah, the way that I pair students and tutors or teachers, it's very bespoke. We'd have a chat, probably about 10 minutes. I just kind of want to get a sense of the fingerprint, the blueprint for your son or daughter, as well as the academics and the predicted grades and all of these other things. What ignites them? What are they into? Because the tutors are also people, so maybe they also really love, I don't know, sci-fi or something like that. And the wonderful thing about my team is that I've worked alongside most of them over my career working internationally. So I kind of know them as people. So I can get a sense of, okay, right, you'd be really great with Jamie, or you'd be really great with Susan, because that stuff does matter. I think you don't have to love your tutor, but I think you have to sort of rub along well enough that you're not chalk and cheese. In addition, of course, to all of the prerequisites of experience and qualifications, and obviously whether you want a tier 1, 2, or 3 tutor. So it's sort of like a dating app for tutoring.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good way to explain it. Right. Thank you so much for giving
My
up
pleasure. Thank you. It's good to
so
chew the
much
fat.
usefulness for parents.
Good.
So a massive thank you, and parents, we'll make sure we list those details somewhere as well, so that you can
Perfect.
get back to them. And yeah, massive thank you.
Brilliant. Well, good luck, everybody, with the next wave of the next wave of exams and the inevitable. And yeah, I think often the build up can be worse than the reality, as with many things in life. And I think if you arm yourself with the right people around you, including sort of tutors, but of course, ideally good communication with the school, and as much as you're able to, good communication with your teenager, which obviously is um, no
Challenging.
words for it sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if you can kind of get those foundations rolling before the time hits where it's like, oh, the system's buckling, everything's kind of grinding to a halt because those things aren't in place. So like, yeah, lubricate those wheels as early in the academic year as you can, and then it's just everybody, it's a smoother ride for everyone. So
Absolutely, and a great place, I think, to finish with those wise words. Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you, Emily.